Hello, I'm Steven, the Calculator Guy, founder of DeFi Dojo Discord, and prices are up. People are happy, but are people being savvy with their up tokens? That is the question. So today we're going to look at ETH and Bitcoin yields. The purpose of this video is to say, hey, you want to be exposed to Bitcoin, which is really outperforming everything right now. You want to be exposed to ETH. Certainly it's a good secondary asset. It's like holding, the S&P 500 and then also, some other major equity, Google or Apple, or whatever else, who knows? I'm not a stocks guy, let me admit. So let's say you want to be holding these, but you also want to be getting a yield on them because you've been in DeFi for a few years. You feel like you've earned your chops. Let me show you some opportunities and some things you could be doing with it that I feel may be rather risk adjusted. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about, let's see here, the things you want to be looking for. So we're going to be looking at things with like a Delta 1 exposure. So like, lending on Stella, your ETH, you're getting 7.35% to lend your ETH. That's pretty good, right? The risks there are minimal. You're not exposed to impermanent loss. You're not leveraging this up, so you're not exposed to liquidation. Basically, here, all you're lending your ETH to people who are leveraging wrap-staked ETH on Pendle. Now, you might say, I want to leverage wrap-staked ETH on Pendle. Unfortunately, you can't because there's only $600 left to borrow. So you really couldn't leverage unless you're leveraging like $1. And if you're doing that, then you probably shouldn't be in DeFi. But go for it, right? Go for it. Eat up this this remaining borrow if you want to. You can always, just watch this market and see if there's ever any available liquidity to borrow. This is also a more or less Delta 1 exposure to ETH. It's technically a liquidity position between PT wrap-staked ETH and SY wrap-staked ETH. If you don't know what those are, go watch a bunch of videos on Pendle. They have so much content, but it's basically Delta 1 exposure to ETH, which means it's like holding ETH but getting a 30% APR on it, which is really nice, which is why you can see there's so much TVL in here. But it's hard to enter. So, lending on Stella, 7%, that's pretty good. It's a pretty good base yield on ETH. I think we can do a little better, but I do want to make you aware of it, right? Just have it as one of your many options. So it's a very milquetoast, very boring yield, but nice, consistent. Some of the risks here, Stella used to be Alpha Homora. They have some issues with Iron Bank. Also, TVL is pretty low. So those are some things to consider, right? It's an old and tested team, but there are some, some historical issues. If you do want to get your hands dirty with some leverage, there are some LPs here, which I find interesting. Now, what I'm going to mention is that when you are trying to benefit from bullish price movement and just bullish markets in general, if you are going to be LPing, do not match with USDC. Like, don't do ETH USDC, don't do Bitcoin USDC, don't do Arbitrum USDC, because you're just going to lose so much potential gains through impermanent loss. Whereas if you pick a pair like Pendle ETH or ETH ARB even, or let's see, ETH GMX kind of correlated. All of these, which have really good APRs right now, by the way, 477%, 333%, 500%, that's max leverage. All of these are pretty correlated pairs. I mean, we can go and look over here at like, let's see, ETH. So ETH BTC, somewhat correlated, ETH definitely doing worse, but this is not a super volatile chart. If you look at ETH USDC divided by, let's say, Pendle as an example, Pendle, you can see, go, enter. You can see it's, using daily chart, it's pretty correlated. Like, this is not a massive deviation. This is plus or minus like 10% from its norm. And if you look at more recent times, let's say the past, this is the past 15 days, it's plus or minus 8%. So really not that bad. And if you're getting plus or minus 8% variation with 100% APR, could be worth it. What you're looking for is things that are highly correlated. That's what you want to be in. If you're in highly correlated pairs and there's lots of volume and you're getting lots of fees, it can overcome the impermanent loss. What you don't want to do is pair yourself to something that is fixed because then impermanent loss is just going to eat you to pieces. So that's telling. I don't particularly love these pools. I don't want to have a lot of leverage. I would rather be more risk off and just enjoy the benefits of my tokens going up while I'm getting a yield on them. That's just me. So another place you can do that is SMIA. Now, as you guys know, I do have a data science firm that I co-founded called DeFi Labs, and DeFi Labs does work with SMIA, so I'm super biased here. But these are Delta 1 exposed vaults. So if you want to go get a yield on STETH, right, wrap staked ETH, 8.16%. It's pretty good. It's beating Stella. It's a single-sided exposure. It's got $12 million in the vault. So this vault has 5 times more TVL than this entire protocol. Then you have Turbo. That's a stablecoin vault. Let's not talk about stables. You have Turbo Sweeth. So Sweeth is a bit depegged right now. If you want to play the repeg play, they say they're going to have redemptions March 31st, a few months from now. So like that repeg play, arbitrage is something like 8% annualized, 8% annualized plus staking yield 3%. That's like 11% on your ETH just to hold Sweeth, just holding it. That's arbitrage. And then if you want to benefit from yield on top of that, you could go deposit it into here or your ETH into here. And then it converts to the vault. 4.5 million TVL. You're going to end up hopefully with the repeg play doing pretty good. Then there's real yield ETH, 11% here. 7% real yield plus incentives. All of these things are like Delta 1 exposures to these assets, getting decent, consistent yield, high TVL, 23 million, 4.5 million, 11 million here. Real yield Bitcoin, 12 million. And this is a Bitcoin yield, really, really hard to get Bitcoin yield. So like 3% APY since inception plus some incentive yields. That's the kind of thing that I think, okay, single side exposure, pretty interesting, not exciting. You're not getting like those crazy high APRs, but you're getting something. If you want some of those crazy APRs, there are some options, but of course, with great yield comes great risk. So I kind of dumbly decided that I wanted to LP ETH wrap Bitcoin because they're somewhat correlated, but I'm getting eaten up in permanent loss. I mean, not in permanent loss, but like price movement back and forth. So fee APR, great. Total APR, not great, because ETH actually moved up versus Bitcoin lately. So like if I denominate this in ETH, I'm not doing super great. And because I paid gas costs earlier, even denominated against hold, not super great. But we'll see. This is only like a 2-day old position. A lot of this P&L is gas cost. So yet to be determined. Don't judge me. But if you had a wider range, you could probably do better here. Here's another one that might be more interesting, right? MEV ETH WETH. So MEV ETH is still 3% under peg. This is a manifold ETH. One day you'll be able to redeem this for ETH in the far and distant future. But until then, you have being underpegged plus volume plus volatility makes for some interesting yields. So here you can see I have a pretty tight position right here. And in the 1% fee tier, it's doing okay, right? Now, generally, there's not too many swaps, but there are enough swaps to generate APR. And so this is kind of like being just exposed to ETH. I mean, it is, except MEV ETH isn't redeemable yet, kind of like Swell ETH. But what it is, it should go back to parity, and you should be having a good time. So there's an arbitrage yield, it's a Uniswap v3 yield, and it's okay, right? I've enjoyed this so far. And you guys can even see like my Pendle ETH position has been doing pretty good, right? APR 42%. And I've had this since late August. So this is versus holding versus ETH. Pretty good here, right? So versus ETH, I'm up 6% roughly on my investment since late August. I think that's great. I love gaining ETH. Always makes me happy. So, okay, cool. Let's look at those now, or let's be done looking at those and look at some other places. I want to talk about like your really basic types of yields, like your old man yields, your yields that anyone can go and get if they're patient. Right now on Aave, you can look at like wrap staked ETH or even Coinbase ETH gets you about. Let's look at Coinbase ETH. Coinbase ETH, 'cause it's like anomalously high right now. Coinbase ETH is getting you a yield of 4.2. Which is super high for what Coinbase ETH usually gets. It usually gets like closer to 3% or 3.2. So if we use this number, which it may last, it might not, we're looking at some pretty nice leverage yields. Right now it's 4.2% on your collateral, right? So come over to my handy dandy calculator, type in that 4.2%. Borrow cost on ETH right now on Aave is 3.15%. So it's a total yield of 8.4% on ETH if you're maxed leverage. Now, okay, all right, but actually the LTV here is 90%, so you can get 13.65%. The yield on Coinbase ETH is probably going down. All right, let's all admit that. So probably you're not going to get this, but right now you are. Right? Like right now, that's what the yield is. I can't say Coinbase ETH is going to stay there. If we instead looked at wrap staked ETH, which I think is at 3.7 today, still pretty good, 8.65% return. Now let's talk about Aave on base chain. This is where things get kind of interesting because on base chain, the borrow rate of ETH is much lower, 2.65. That's nuts. That's crazy. So let's just use CB ETH, right? So go back. CB ETH is at 4.2. Borrow cost at, what was that, 3.6? Was it only 3.6? Let's go over there. 3.65. Okay, 3.65. And you can see collateral yield, LTV, borrow cost, 2.65. Sorry. 18.15%. Now that's totally real yield coming from depositors, from borrowers, from the leverage stake yield of CB ETH. That's a nice ETH yield. Now, of course, this is probably going to go back down. It's probably going to go back to like 3.3. But that's still a good base yield on ETH. It's respectable, and maybe the borrow cost goes up. I don't know, but like I think it's a good yield. What I'm trying to get across to you guys though is that I want to be Delta 1 exposed to ETH. I don't want to be getting torn up by impermanent loss. Highly correlated pairs with really good volume, those are fine because I'm okay with being exposed to a little bit of impermanent loss if the yields are really high. But I want highly correlated pairs like Pendle ETH has been pretty good. GMX ETH is okay. Bitcoin ETH, my pair is too tight, but generally those are highly correlated assets. And so if the volume is good, the yield can be good. Again, also if you can't choose between Bitcoin and ETH, it's nice to have that pair because you're generating decent fees while they're moving together. You do probably want to have a wider range though. I was a little bit silly with my super tight range. There's Pendle, right? So Pendle has all these are single exposure, right? You have let's go to the LPs here. If you want just fixed rate yields, there's some decent fixed rate yields here. 4% fixed rate on STETH, 4.5% fixed rate on OETH. This is Origin Protocol, audited by the best, right? Trail of Bits, Open Zeppelin, really, really good. 4.5% fixed rate. What that means is that you have to hold this to expiry to make sure you get that yield. Now, I think this is crazy because the underlying APY is actually lower than the implied APY. So this is maybe overpriced. So this is a great time to enter the PT asset because if the PT underlying yield or the implied yield, if the implied yield starts to go down, you are getting a return faster. The PT asset actually increases in value. So buying the PT asset is kind of like shorting the implied yield. And if the underlying yield is lower than the implied yield, it might be a good time to short it, right? That's one of the sort of like tricks of the trade with Pendle here. So much content on Pendle if you want to learn more. Okay, so then there's like StaffI ETH. This is honestly not that bad of a protocol. I don't know why people just fade it so much. It's an Asian protocol. I think maybe that's why. But who cares? There are some good Asian protocols. So StaffI ETH or StaffI R ETH is ironically a Rocket Pool fork. So it's like StaffI's R ETH, and they have a great fixed APR of 6.1%. You do have to be exposed to it for 243 days if you want to get all of that. The underlying APY is 7.24%. I wonder how they're getting that. It's really high yield for staking ETH. So you might also just want to go stake your ETH with StaffI. Now, again, less known protocol, smaller protocol. I don't know, less robust audits, but they do have audits, and they do have like community diligence on their code. So there's that. All of these are interesting, right? They're ways to get fixed rate returns on your ETH if you don't care for yield volatility. Then, of course, if you do care for yield volatility and you want to get like some exposure to these LPs that are sort of Delta 1, there is the LPs, right? You're probably going to need a half of these. I would go to Arbitrum for the better yields here. Arbitrum, even these, I don't know, these aren't jumping out to me as like being super sexy LPs. So I probably wouldn't participate in them. Okay, let's talk about some other yields, right? Let's say that you want to participate in some like ways in which to preserve capital. So you're in the bull market, you're doing great, you're winning, and now you want to say, okay, I want to hedge now without selling. I want to hedge without selling, and I want to get paid to hedge. What you can do is you can open shorts, right? So what does it mean to open a short? It means that you're effectively going, I mean, you guys know what opening a short means, but you want to get paid to do that. So how do you do that? Well, when everyone is long, right? When everyone is long, you get paid to short on perpetual dexes. So let's just say you wanted to short your BTC exposure. Right now, Levana is crazy. It's such a fun place to do like funding rate arbitrage. Levana is paying like 200% to short Bitcoin. No one wants to be short Bitcoin right now. That's why they're paying so much, right? They need to incentivize shorts. So let's just say you did really well in this run up and you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, but you don't really want to be exposed to the drawdown. You can come over here and you can hedge. Let's say you have $1,000 position, right? And you say, okay, well, I only want to use $200 to hedge. You could take a 5x short with that $200, cover your whole $1,000 exposure. And like you don't get liquidated until the price of Bitcoin goes up, let's say 20%. So Bitcoin has to go up another 20%, which is like this whole run for you to get liquidated. And if it goes down, you are effectively delta neutral on your position, and you're getting paid 200%. So hedging is a nice way to get paid while risking off while you're expecting a pullback, right? So there are so many strategies you can do to express your narrative through the markets. And that's really like what I care about. I don't love telling people what to do with their money, but I love showing people how to express their sentiment with DeFi tools. So like if people know, okay, I like being long under these circumstances, but under these circumstances, I want to be risk off. And under these circumstances, I wish I knew how to short. Well, what I like to do is like teach people how to be super, super expressive with their theses so that they can do whatever, they can literally perform whatever they think is going to happen in a way that gets them yield while doing it. It's fun for me. Now Solidly, shout out to the Solidly guys. They're ruthless with their marketing, but just haven't been able to track the TVL. I think it's because people like Solidly forks on Arbitrum and even Optimism, I guess. But really on ETH mainnet, it's just not the game people play. So they've had some trouble attracting TVL, but there are some interesting yields over there. So Solidly now has like concentrated liquidity. You can go over there and you can see there are some interesting yields. Again, I do not want like ETH USDC pairs. Look at this. It's paying 1,000% APR in like a close range. That's ugly. 1,000%. But I don't want that, right? I'm telling you right now, I would prefer to be spot holding wrapped Ethereum than to be USDC ETH for 1,000% APR. Now you might say, Steven, that's crazy, right? Well, I think that it is reasonable. Well, one, this is going to get diluted. And this is like such a narrow band that you're going to go out of range with any movement. But two, I think ETH can double, right? I think ETH can triple. In fact, I think ETH has the capacity to go to $8,000 in like a bullish period, which might happen in 2024. So I'd rather be exposed spot. I just don't like these pairs. Now, if I'm hedging, if I think markets are crabbish, if I think markets are bearish, these are fine. I love these pairs. But right now, my sentiment's just not there. Now, I'm not telling you that to tell you what to do. Do your own thing. But like things like Link wrapped Ethereum, there's no liquidity here. Like $11,000. Okay, you're going to come dilute this. But things like this, right? Like Link ETH, like Bitcoin ETH, these are much more interesting to me because I'm at least getting delta exposure to assets that I like, that I don't mind being exposed to, while also getting a yield. So those are the sorts of things that I'm looking for in more bullish markets. Now, also, I'm always looking for arbitrage plays. So as I mentioned, MEV ETH is down. MEV ETH is down by 3%. Swell ETH is down by, let's go over. Let's check out Swell ETH right now. So Swell ETH would be on Gecko Terminal. Swell ETH, I think they're down by like 3%. So like the Swell ETH token is backed by 1.37, roughly 1.04, not 1.37, 1.037 or 1.04. ETH. So, but it's only worth like 1.01. So it's under pegged by 3% last I checked, which is not, yeah, it's roughly under pegged by 3%. So not great, right? Not what you want to see. But if you're arbitraging, who cares, right? If you're saying, I have a long time horizon, I don't mind being exposed here, have at it, right? Why not? You can benefit from this. So it's been in a pretty tight range here. There are plenty of things you can do if you wanted to try to open a Uni V3 position and benefit from this ranging. You certainly could. If you just want to buy, spot, and hold until redemption, you could probably get around 10% APR doing that without doing anything except for buying and holding. So, arbitrage plays, a lot of fun, sometimes worth your while. I think that's about it, really. Like, there are other things you can be doing. I'll mention one, Fraxlend. So, like, some of the other things that I find really interesting are SFrax ETH, just because it has a good yield on it. But the borrow rates are so high on all of these right now because SFrax has just got this crazy high yield that I'm not going to be borrowing here. But what you could kind of do is, like, if you want to get a yield on Bitcoin, and it's so hard to get a yield on Bitcoin, aside from the SMIA vault, which gives you a decent yield on Bitcoin, you could just, like, let's say go over to Aave, right? Collateralize your Bitcoin on Ethereum. This is what people did during the last bull market. So shout out to Taiki. He was always talking about doing strategies like this. You collateralize the asset you're long on because you want to be exposed to it, and then borrow some sort of stable coin against it. Geez, rates are terrible. I would probably, USDT seems to be the best here. LUSD is at 8%. Why? Frax at 5%. That's kind of okay. So you borrow it, right? Frax at 5%. Let's just say like 50% LTV, make it easy. So you're effectively paying 2% on your 2.7% on your principal. So right now you're down 2%, 2.7% APR. But take over to Fraxlend, go deposit in Curve. Now you're getting 11% or 12% there. So cut that in half, 6%, 6 minus 2, 4. You're roughly net 4%. So you're getting 4% APR on your Bitcoin. That's okay. That's pretty good, right? It's not bad. Now, if you want to do some of the other crazy plays, right? Like, borrow some ETH and go LP MEV ETH for some ridiculous APR, you're probably not going to get this, guys. This is like dumb tight, exposed and permanent loss. Takes a lot of balls to stay in this position because it constantly goes out of range. 1% swap fee, so you're going to kill yourself trying to get into this position. Really, like, please know what you're doing before doing this. Don't just see this and like say, oh, I'm going to ape into this because Steven got 240%. That's not what you're going to get. I have like honed in and practiced on this position for half a year now to get here. So please don't just like dumb ape into it. But like this is just collateralizing the asset you want long exposure to, borrowing some yield asset and getting yield on it. What you don't want to do is mix the delta of the borrow because that's just scary times. You don't want to borrow USD and then sell that for like ETH or something and then go LP that, because God forbid something happens to the ratio of those tokens and now you have to go buy more to pay off your debt. Whatever you borrow, that's the kind of asset you want to get yield on. So if you think you can go get like 30% on ETH somewhere, maybe the Stella vault gets more deposits, and you say, okay, I'll deposit Bitcoin, I'll borrow ETH, and I'll go into the Stella vault for 30%. And borrowing ETH costs you like 4%, so you don't mind. You're getting 30%, you're paying 4%, and you can have a higher LTV because they're so correlated. You can end up getting like 15, 20% on your Bitcoin, which is super hard to do. So like those are the kind of strategies you want to be thinking about. Anyways, I'm going to stop there. Main ideas I want you to take away from this is that in bullish conditions, like if you want to be exposed to the market, I caution against things that expose you to impermanent loss. So this is like stablecoin volatile pairs like ETH USDC, Bitcoin USDC, Link USDC, whatever it is in a stablecoin, because you're just going to be torn up and lose out on potential gains, even if the yield's really high. what I would say is better if you want to do LPing are highly correlated pairs like your ETH BTCs, maybe your Pendle ETHs, right? Go out and look for high correlated pairs. You can do that on TradingView. That's pretty simple. And then you want to look at volume, right? Is the volume there? Is there going to be enough swapping through there that makes things interesting? Hey, Trader Joe's is a great source of yield right now. We should have even looked at that, but can't make this video forever. Trader Joe's is a nice place for yields right now. They also do concentrated liquidity. Check them out. And then single-sided yields. So what does that mean? It means that I'm not getting impermanent loss. I'm not exposed to this, that, and the other thing. Do be mindful of protocol risks. This is why I like using tried and true protocols, things with multiple millions of TVL. Aave, clearly I love using it. Uniswap v3, love using it. SMIA, it's got over 40 million TVL right now, great audits. I don't mind using it. Of course, I'm biased there. But and then like IBC, I don't mind IBC protocols because they tend not to get exploited, knock on wood. No one's attacking IBC because no one cares because the TVL is so low. But there's some interesting yields over there. So, and then the last thing is one of the many ways to get yields on your blue chips and things you want to be holding is by collateralizing them, borrowing against them, and then getting a yield on the thing you borrow. But please don't mix delta on what you borrow. Like don't borrow and swap unless you're trying to get leverage or trying to get mixed delta exposure. All right. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to talk strategy, go ahead and join the DeFi Dojo Discord. We just had a great competition where the DeFi Dojo is giving away $2,000 to the best strategist for the past 2 months. So strategists will post their strategies. One strategy did 20% ROI on ETH, I think, over the past 2 months. So fantastic job, Crypto. You know who you are. Other strategies just, doing well. So if you want to see high level strategies, better strategies than I'm making every day, and then just really clever people, go ahead, join the DeFi Dojo Discord. Link in the description. It's the WAP link. And we'd love to see you there, right? Free 7-day trial. If you don't like it, don't pay for it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.